Chapter 22. Friendship. Tradition tells of another kind of teaching by Pythagorean maxims pertaining to human opinions and practices, some examples of which may here be mentioned. It advised to remove strife from an untrue friendship. If possible, this was to apply to all friendship, but at all events to that towards parents, elders, and benefactors. Existing friendships with such as these would not be preserved but destroyed by rivalry, contention, anger, and subsequent graver passions. The scars and ulcers which their advice sometimes cause should be minimized as much as possible, which will be effected if especially the younger of the two should learn how to yield and subdue his angry emotions. On the other hand, the so-called paidartices, or corrections and admonitions of the elder towards the younger, should be made with much suavity of manners and great caution, also with much solicitude and tact, which makes the reproof all the more graceful and useful. Faith should never be separated from friendship, whether seriously or in jest. Existing friendship cannot survive the insinuation of deceit between professors and friendship, nor should friendship be affected by misfortune or other human vicissitude. And the only rejection of friendship which is commendable is that which follows definite and incurable vice. Such is an example of the Pythagorean hortatory maxims, which extended to all the virtues and the whole of life. Chapter 23. Use of parables in instruction. Pythagoras considered most necessary the use of parables in instruction. Most of the Greeks had adopted it as the most ancient, and it had been both preferentially, I haven't read that word in a while, and in principle employed by the Egyptians, who had developed it in the most varied manner. In harmony with this, it will be found that Pythagoras attended to it sedulously, seduciously. I don't know. If from the Pythagorean symbols we unfold their significance and arcane intentions, developing their content of rectitude and truth, liberating them from their enigmatic form, when, according to straightforward and uniform tradition, they are accommodated to the sublime intelligence of these philosophers, they deify beyond human conception. Those who came from this school, not only the most ancient Pythagoreans, but also those who, during his old age, were still young, such as Philolaus and Eurytus, Charondas and Zaleucus, Bryson and the elder Archytas. Ooh, these names, man. This is the fun part. Okay. Aristeus, Lysis, and Empedocles. Why was that the easy one? Zamoixus and Epimenides, Milo and Leucippus, Alcmaeon and Hippasus, and Thymaridas were all of that age, a multitude of savants, incomparably excellent, All those adopted this mode of teaching both in their conversations and commentaries and annotations. Their writings also, and all the books which they published, most of which have been preserved to our times, were not composed in popular or vulgar diction, or in a manner usual to all other writers, so as to be immediately understood, but anyway such as to be not easily apprehended by the readers. For they adopted Pythagoras' law of reserve, in an arcane manner of concealing divine mysteries from the uninitiated, obscuring their writings and mutual conversations. He came up with the first blinds. Okay. Oh, there's nothing new under the sun. He reestablished it for our civilization. The result is that they who presents these he who presents these symbols without unfolding his meaning by an unsuitable exposition runs the danger of exposing others and himself to the charge of being ridiculous and inane, trifling and garrulous. I don't even know what that means. Go and look that up. Gee. When, however, they expounded according to these symbols and made clear and obvious even to the crowds, then they will be found analogous to prophetic sayings such as the oracles of the Pythian Apollo. Their admirable meaning will inspire those who unite intellect and scholarliness. It might be well to mention a few of them. Explain this mode of discipline. Not negligently enter into a temple or adore carelessly, even if only at the doors. Sacrifice and adore unshod, shunning public roads. Walk in unfrequented paths. Not without light speak about Pythagorean affairs. Such is a sketch of the symbolic mode of teaching adopted by Pythagoras. Chapter 24. Dietary suggestions. You might want to not eat the fast food. I'm going to apathetically suggest that you not drink soda. Since food used properly and regularly greatly contributes to the best discipline, it may be interesting to consider Pythagoras' precepts on the subject. Forbidden was generally all food causing flatulence or indigestion, while he recommended the contrary kind of food that preserve and are astringent. Wherefore he recommended the nutritious qualities of millet. Rejected was all food foreign to the gods, as withdrawing us from communion with them. On the other hand, he forbade to his disciples all food that was sacred, as too honorable to subverse common utility. He exhorted his disciples to abstain from such things as were an impediment to prophecy or to the purity and chastity of the soul, or to the habit of temperance and virtue. Lastly, he rejected all things that were an impediment to sanctity, and disturbed or obscured the other purities of the soul and the phantasms which occur in sleep. Such were the general regulations about food. Someone mentioned this before. Specifically, however, the most contemplative of the philosophers who had arrived at the summit of philosophic attainments were forbidden superfluous food such as wine, or unjustifiable food such as was animated, and not to sacrifice animals to the gods, nor by any means to injure animals, but to observe most solicitous justice towards them. He himself lived after this manner, abstaining from animal food, and adoring altars undefiled with blood. He was likewise careful to prevent others from destroying animals of a nature kindred to ours, and rather corrected and instructed savage animals that injured them as punishment. Then injured them as punishment. Further, he ordered abstaining from animal food even to politicians, for as they desired to act justly to the highest degree, they must certainly not injure any kindred animals. How indeed could they persuade others to act justly if they themselves were detected in an insatiable avidity in devouring animals allied to us? These are conjoined to us by a fraternal alliance through the communion of life and the same elements, and the commingly and the commingling of these. Never heard of that word either. Someone go ahead and look up that word. That'd be nice. Eating the flesh of certain animals was, however, permitted to those whose life was not entirely purified, philosophic and sacred, but even for those was appointed a definite time of abstinence. Besides, these were not to eat the heart nor the brain, which entirely forbidden to all Pythagoreans, for these organs are predominant and, as it were, ladders and seats of wisdom and life. Food other than animals was by him also considered sacred, on account of the nature of divine reason. Thus his disciples were to abstain from mallows, because this plant is the first messenger and signal of the sympathy of celestial with terrestrial natures. Moreover, the fish Melanurus was interdicted. I don't even know what that one is. Because, whatever that word is, because sacred to the earthly gods, likewise the Erythinus beans. Likewise the Erythinus beans, also on account of many causes, also were interdicted, were spoken about. Physical, psychic, and sacred. Someone tell me if that's what that word means, please. If I don't get around to looking it up, it'd be nice to know. Many other, you know what? That's a rude thing. That's a rude thing to ask for. No, I take that back. If you actually bother to do that, then you will get an automatic pinned comment on the next video. There you go. There's something in it for you. I already talked about it. Many other similar precepts were enjoined in the attempt to lead men to virtue through their food. Food for thought. Think before you ask people to do silly things you can do yourself easily. 25. Music and poetry. Pythagoras was likewise of opinion that music, if properly used, greatly contributed to health, for he was not wont to use it in a careless way, but as a purification. In a careless way? Was wont to use it. Oh, I thought. Okay, god damn it! I'm fucking this up already. For he was wont to use it in no careless way, but as a purification. Indeed, he restricted this word to signify music used as medicine. He's like, whoa, that's not music. Turn that off. That's insulting. About the vernal season, he used a melody in this manner. In the middle was placed a person who played on the lyre, and seated around him in a circle were those able to sing. Then the lyrist in the center struck up, and the singers raised certain paeans, through which they were evidently so overjoyed that their manners became elegant and orderly. This music, instead of medicines, was also used at certain other times. Certain melodies were devised as remedies against the passions of the soul, and also against despondency and gnashing of the teeth, which were invented by Pythagoreans as specifics. Further, he employed other melodies against anger and rage, and all other aberrations of the soul. Another kind of modulation was invented against desires. He likewise used dancing, which was accompanied by the lyre instead of the pipe. The pipe! Which he conceived to have an influence towards insolence, being theatrical and by no means liberal. That shit ain't alpha. That's not liberal. For the purpose of correcting the soul, he also used select verses of Homer and Hesiod. It is related among the deeds of Pythagoras that once, through a spondiac song, he extinguished the rage of a Taramanian lad, who, after feasting by night, intended to burn the vestibule of the house of his mistress, on seeing her issuing from the house of a rival. To this rash attempt the lad had been inflamed by a Phrygian song, which, however, Pythagoras at once suppressed. As Pythagoras was astronomizing, he happened to meet this Phrygian piper at an unseasonable time of night, and persuaded him to change his Phrygian song for a spondiac one, through which, the fury of the lad being immediately repressed, he retired home in an orderly manner, although but in a little while since he had stupidly insulted Pythagoras, as, on meeting him, would bear no admonition and could not be restrained. Here is another instance. Achatus, the host of Empedocles, had as judge condemned to death the father of a young who rushed on Anchitus with drawn sword, intending to slay him. I just said it, Empedocles. Empedocles changed the youth's intention by singing to his lyre that verse of Homer, Odd 4, Odysseus, I don't know, Nepenthe without gall, o'er every ill, oblivion spreads, whatever. Thus saving his host Achatus from death and the youth from committing murder. It is said that from that time on the youth became one of the most faithful disciples of Pythagoras. The Pythagoreans distinguished three states of mind, called exartesis, or readiness, synermoge, or fitness, and epiphe, or contact, which converted the soul to contrary passions, and these could be produced by certain appropriate songs. When they retired, they purified their reasoning powers from the noises and perturbations to which they had been exposed during the day by certain odes and hymns which produced tranquil sleep, and few but good dreams. But when they arose from slumbers, they again liberated themselves from the dazedness and torpor of sleep by songs of another kind. Sometimes the passions of the soul and certain diseases were, as they said, genuinely lured by enchantments, by musical sounds alone. Boop, 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 boo, without words. That's what I'm talking about. Words just ruin the music, man. This is indeed probably the origin of the general use of the word epode, epode, epode. Thus, therefore, through music, Pythagoras produced the most beneficial correction of manners and lives. Ooh, I'm thirsty as could be. Let me pause. Alrighty. Excuse me. Chapter 26. Theoretical Music from Nicomachus. While describing Pythagoras' wisdom in instructing his disciples, we must not fail to note that he invented the harmonic science and ratios. But to explain this, we must go a little backwards in time. Once, as he was intently considering music and reasoning with himself whether it be possible to devise some instrumental assistance to the sense of hearing so as to systematize it as sight is made precise by the compass rule and telescope, or touch is made reckonable by balance and measures. So thinking of these things, Pythagoras happened to pass by a brazier's shop, where providentially he heard the hammers beating out a piece of iron on the anvil, producing sounds that harmonized except one. But he recognized in these sounds the concord of the octave, the fifth and the fourth. It goes like this, the fourth, He saw that the sound between the fourth and the fifth, taken by itself, was a dissonance, and yet completed the greatest sound among them. Delighted, therefore, to find that the thing he was anxious to discover had by divine assistance succeeded, he went into the smithy, and by various experiments discovered that the difference of the sound arose from the magnitude of the hammers, but not from the force of the strokes, nor from the shape of the hammers, nor from the change of position of the beaten iron. Having then accurately examined the weights and the swings of the hammers, he returned home and fixed one stake diagonally to the walls, lest some difference should arise from there being several of them, or from some difference in the material of the stakes. From the stake he then suspended 4 gut strings of similar material, size, thickness, and twist. A weight was suspended from the bottom of each. When the strings were equal in length, he struck 2 of them simultaneously. He reproduced the former intervals, forming different pairs. He discovered that the string stretched by the greatest weight, when compared with that stretched by the smallest weight, the interval of an octave. The weight of the first was 12 pounds, and that of the latter 6. Being therefore in a double ratio, it formed the octave, which was made plain by the weights themselves. Then he found that the string from which the greater weight was suspended, compared to that from which was suspended the weight next to the smallest, and which weight was 8 pounds, produced the interval known as the fifth. Hence, he discovered that this interval is in a ratio of 1.5 to 1, or 3 to 1, in which ratio the weights also were to each other. Then he found that the string stretched by the greatest weight produced, when compared with that which was next to it in weight, namely 9 pounds, the interval called the fourth, analogous to the weights. This ratio, therefore, he discovered to be in the ratio of 1.33 to 1, or 4 to 3, while that of the form string from which a weight of 9 pounds was suspended to the string which had the smallest weight, again in a ratio of 2 to 3, which is 9 to 6. In like manner, the string next to that from which the small weight was suspended was to that which had the smallest weight in the ratio of 4 to 3, being 8 to 6, but to the string which had the greatest weight in a ratio of 3 to 2, being 12 to 8. Hence, that which is between the fifth and fourth, and by which the fifth exceeds the fourth, is proved to be as 9 is to 8. But either way, it may be proved that the octave is a system consisting of the fifth in conjunction with fourth, just as the double ratio consists of 3 to 2 and 4 to 3, as for instance 12, 8, and 6, or conversely of the fourth and the fifth, as in the double ratio of 4 to 3 and 3 to 2, as for instance 12, 9, and 6. Therefore, and in this order, having confirmed both his hand and hearing to the suspended weights, and having established according to them the ratio of the proportions, by an easy artifice he transferred the common suspensions of the strings from the diagonal stake to the head of the instrument, which he called cordotenton, or string stretcher. Ha! Then by the aid of pegs he produced a tension of the strings analogous to the effect by the weights. Employing this method, therefore, as a basis and as it were an infallible rule, he afterward extended the experiment to other instruments, namely the striking of pans to pipes, and I don't know what the fuck that is, to monochords, triangles, and the like, in all of which he found the same ratio of numbers to obtain. Then he named the sound which participates in the number 6, tonic that which participates of the number 8, and is 4 to 3 subdominant, that which participates to the number 9, and is 1 tone higher than the subdominant he called dominant, and 9 to 8, but that which participates to the number 12, octave. Ooh. Then he filled up the middle spaces with analogous sounds in diatonic order, and formed an octochord from symmetric numbers, from the double, the 3 to 2, the 4 to 3, and from the distance of these, the 8 to 9. Thus he discovered the harmonic progression, which tends by a certain physical necessity from the lowest to the most acute sound, diatonically. Later, from the diatonic, he progressed to the chromatic and enharmonic orders, as we shall later show when we treat of music. This diatonic scale, however, seems to have the following progression: a semitone, a tone, and a tone. Progression, a semitone, a tone, and a tone. What? And this is the fourth. Am I misreading this? A semitone, a tone, and then another tone. Okay. And this is the fourth, being a system consisting of 2 tones, and of what is called a semitone. Afterwards, adding another tone, we produce the fifth, which you plead, which is a system consisting of 3 tones and a semitone. Next to this is the system of a semitone, a tone, and another tone, forming another fourth. That is, another fourth 2-3 ratio. 4-to-3 ratio. Thus, in the more ancient octave, indeed, all the sounds from the lowest pitch, which are with respect to each other fourths, produce everywhere with each other fourths the semitone. Thus, in the more ancient octaves, all the sounds from the lowest pitch, which are with respect to each other fourths, produce everywhere with each other fourths the semitone by transition, receiving the first, middle, and third place according to the tetrachord. Now, in the Pythagoric octave, however, which by conjunction is a system of the tetrachord and pentachord, but if disjointed is a system of 2 tetrachords separated from each other. The progression is from the gravest to the most acute sound. Hence all sounds that by the distance from each other are fifths, with each other produce the interval of the fifth, the semitone successfully proceeding into 4 places, the first, second, third, and fourth. This is the way, my brothers, in which music is said to have been discovered by Pythagoras. Pythagoras knows where the queen is, you guys. Having reduced it to a system, he delivered it to his disciples to utilize it to produce things as beautiful as possible. She is beautiful. The queen is beautiful. This story of the smithy is an ancient error, as pieces of iron give the same note whether struck by heavy or light hammers. Pythagoras may therefore have brought the discovery with him from Egypt, though he may also have developed the further details mentioned in this chapter. 43 minutes remaining. What is this one? What is the counting up to? I guess it's saying I have 10 minutes left. All right, I don't believe it. I don't believe it. We're just gonna cut it here, and I'm gonna have to data dump. Y'all have a good, well, whatever time of day it is. But you know what? The time is always now. Have a good now. Do it. Don't wait for my permission. Do it. Go. Get out of here. Go outside or something. Find your girl. Make some fucking white babies.